Imagine a decade when rockets raced to the moon and paranoia ruled the streets. The 1960s were not just an age of revolutions, but of cinematic prophecy. Beneath the shadow of Cold War fear and nuclear dread, visionary filmmakers crafted science fiction that questioned humanity's sanity. Some were banned, others forgotten, but all were daring. These are 15 underrated sci-fi movies of the 1960s you must watch today. The Damned, 1963. When Joseph Losey's The Damned premiered, audiences didn't know what to make of it. Was it a biker film, a Cold War thriller, or an apocalyptic prophecy? Critics dismissed it as confused, and Columbia Pictures buried it for years. Yet beneath its chaotic shell lies one of the most chilling visions of mankind's self-destruction ever filmed. The story follows a young American tourist who gets entangled with a violent British biker gang led by an unstable Oliver Reed. After a chase along the windswept cliffs of Dorset, they stumble upon a government facility hiding radioactive children, products of a secret experiment to survive nuclear war. The twist: these children are radioactive themselves, doomed to live underground, untouched, unseen, unwanted. The studio panicked. Losey, an American exile blacklisted by McCarthyism, filled the film with anti-government cynicism and moral rot. Columbia deemed it too bleak and withheld it from wide release in both Britain and America. The result was silence. A film no one saw until it resurfaced in the 70s, instantly earning cult status among dystopian fans. Today, The Damned feels prophetic, a tale of children sacrificed for political control, of innocence glowing in isolation. It's not just science fiction. It's a warning whispered from the atomic age. Humanity's monsters are not born. They're engineered. Seconds, 1966. When Seconds hit theaters, audiences walked out in stunned silence. Some even fainted. Critics called it grotesque and unwatchable. Yet, over time, John Frankenheimer's surreal identity thriller became a touchstone of paranoid sci-fi cinema. The film follows Arthur Hamilton, a disillusioned banker who buys a new life through a mysterious corporation offering rebirth. His face is surgically reconstructed, his identity erased, and he re-emerges as a younger man played by Rock Hudson. But beneath this perfect exterior festers horror, a life scripted by others. Every freedom traded for illusion. Paramount executives didn't know what to do with it. Frankenheimer shot in dizzying wide-angle lenses, warping reality to mirror a man losing his soul. Rock Hudson, known for charming romantic roles, struggled to channel the despair of a man collapsing under existential terror. When audiences realized the pretty leading man could cry like this, the reaction was discomfort bordering on outrage. The film was booed at Cannes. Americans. Critics branded it a nightmare of ugliness. But decades later, its exploration of consumerist identity and bodily reinvention proved visionary. In an era obsessed with plastic perfection, Seconds feels eerily modern. It was a movie ahead of its time, a haunting reminder that even if science could grant us a new face, it could never give us a new soul. The Day the Earth Caught Fire, 1961. Released during the height of nuclear panic, The Day the Earth Caught Fire burned with realism. Unlike American atomic fantasies, this British masterpiece treated apocalypse with journalistic precision. Yet, despite its brilliance, it vanished from mainstream memory. The story unfolds through the eyes of cynical reporter Peter Stenning, who discovers that simultaneous nuclear tests by the US and USSR have tilted Earth off its axis, sending the planet spiraling toward the sun. The air thickens, cities boil, and London becomes an oven of despair. There are no aliens, no heroes, just humanity facing the consequences of its arrogance. Director Val Guest filmed with documentary urgency, using London's fog and sweat-soaked chaos to amplify realism. But the British Board of Film Censors almost banned it for unpatriotic pessimism. They feared its portrayal of government incompetence would damage national morale. Even worse, it subtly attacked nuclear policy at the height of the Cold War. Audiences were unprepared for such brutal honesty. The film barely survived its theatrical run, but later resurfaced as a cult favorite for its prophetic depiction of climate change and media manipulation. Its final image, church bells tolling as humanity prays for a miracle, still chills the spine. The day the Earth caught fire didn't just predict apocalypse. It predicted the way we'd watch it happen, through headlines, denial, and hope fading in the heat. Quatermass and the Pit, 1967. When Hammer Films released Quatermass and the Pit in the winter of 1967, it was overshadowed by flashier American blockbusters. But beneath its modest budget and eerie British restraint lies one of the most visionary science fiction stories ever told, a film that dared to suggest that humanity's origins were not divine or random, but engineered. It begins with the discovery of a mysterious metallic object buried beneath a London underground station. Scientists assume it's an unexploded bomb from World War II, but when Professor Bernard Quatermass examines it, he finds something far more disturbing: an ancient spacecraft, and within it, the fossilized remains of insect-like aliens resembling demons from folklore. The deeper the excavation goes, the more the city begins to unravel. Magnetic fields surge, psychic disturbances spread, and buried fears awaken in the minds of Londoners. Hammer's executives panicked when early screenings left audiences visibly shaken. The BBC had already told a similar story years earlier as a television serial, but the film's haunting imagery and implication that alien influence shaped human evolution provoked outrage among religious groups. They accused it of blasphemy. Censors demanded edits. Hammer refused. Critics dismissed it as pseudo-scientific horror, but the film slowly grew into a legend among scholars of speculative fiction. Its ideas would later echo through 2001, A Space Odyssey, and The X-Files. Today, Quatermass and the Pit feels eerily prophetic. Its vision of buried alien memories haunting our collective psyche remains one of the most intelligent metaphors for inherited violence and tribal fear ever captured on film. It's not just about aliens, it's about the monsters buried in human history itself. 5 Million Years to Earth, 1967. At first glance, 5 Million Years to Earth looked like another pulpy British monster flick. But those who saw it realized it was something far more cerebral, a warning about evolution, memory, and the dangerous arrogance of science. The film begins with a London construction crew uncovering fossilized remains and a mysterious metallic capsule deep below Hobbs' End. As scientists investigate, led by the stoic Professor Quatermass, strange things begin to happen: electromagnetic surges, ghostly visions, and mass hysteria. The revelation? The capsule is a Martian spacecraft that influenced early human development. The creatures that once controlled humanity's mind might still be buried in our DNA. Audiences in the 1960s weren't ready for such an idea. The British public, raised on polite war dramas and Hammer's Gothic horrors, found this blend of archaeology, theology, and science terrifyingly plausible. Religious groups condemned it for suggesting that mankind was genetically engineered by demons. The Church of England publicly criticized the film for attacking the foundations of human faith. Behind the scenes, Hammer's crew fought constant censorship. American distributors cut several minutes of dialogue about evolution and government cover-ups. Even the BBC banned it from television for nearly a decade, citing disturbing psychological implications. But word of mouth transformed it into legend. Later filmmakers like Ridley Scott and John Carpenter cited it as inspiration for Alien and Prince of Darkness. Modern audiences now recognize it as one of the most intelligent and haunting British sci-fi films ever made. 5 Million Years to Earth is not merely entertainment. It's a film that asks a question few dared to voice in the 1960s. What if humanity's greatest terror is not from outer space, but from within our own genetic memory? The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1969. Long before David Bowie turned the story into a pop culture landmark in the 70s, there was a smaller, stranger film that whispered the same idea: The Man Who Fell to Earth, 1969. It was part allegory, part prophecy, and it vanished almost as soon as it was released. This early adaptation followed an alien who crash lands on Earth, seeking water for his dying planet. His advanced technology quickly attracts the attention of governments, corporations, and military forces eager to exploit it. As he tries to adapt to human life, Greed and corruption slowly destroy his mission and his spirit. The film's production was cursed, financing collapsed twice, locations were raided by authorities who believed the crew was filming anti-government propaganda, and the lead actor's breakdown nearly shut the project down. By the time it was completed, distributors wanted nothing to do with its bleak ending, an alien trapped by human avarice, longing for the stars. It was quietly released, then pulled after a week for poor commercial performance. Some theaters even reported walkouts. In truth, audiences were uncomfortable with what the movie was really about: humanity's tendency to destroy anything it doesn't understand. Though forgotten for years, the 1969 version laid the thematic groundwork for Bowie's later, more famous portrayal. Critics who rediscovered it decades later called it hauntingly human and philosophical science fiction at its purest. Its legacy lingers as a mirror held up to mankind's cruelty, showing that sometimes the alien in the story isn't the one from another planet. It's us. Robinson Crusoe on Mars, 1964. When Robinson Crusoe on Mars premiered in the summer of 1964, audiences expected a campy sci-fi adventure, a gimmick that replaced a desert island with the Red Planet. What they got instead was a surprisingly emotional and scientifically grounded survival story that would influence everything from The Martian to Interstellar. Directed by Byron Haskin, who had earlier helmed The War of the Worlds, the film follows astronaut Kit Draper, stranded on Mars after a disastrous mission. Alone, resource-starved, and slowly unraveling, Draper must learn to survive by adapting to an alien ecosystem, harvesting oxygen from rocks, rationing dwindling supplies, and confronting isolation that feels eerily human. Despite its poetic realism, Robinson Crusoe on Mars struggled with critics. The title made it sound childish, and Paramount marketed it as pulp adventure for kids. Yet behind the whimsical name was one of the most intelligent explorations of loneliness in all of 60s cinema. NASA consultants had secretly assisted the production, ensuring its depiction of Martian survival was as scientifically plausible as possible for the time. Still, religious groups objected to its godless message of human self-sufficiency, while others complained that its allegory for slavery, when Draper rescues and befriends an escaped alien slave, was too political for mainstream America. By the time Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey arrived a few years later, Haskin's masterpiece had already faded from theaters. But in retrospect, its influence is unmistakable, from its lonely landscapes to its unflinching portrayal of human fragility. Today, Robinson Crusoe on Mars stands as a reminder that true survival is not about technology, but spirit. It's the quiet endurance of one man, staring into a red horizon, whispering to himself that even in the silence of another world, hope still breathes. The Andromeda Strain, 1969. Before germ warfare and biohorror became staples of modern cinema, there was The Andromeda Strain, a film so scientifically obsessive that it frightened real scientists. Directed by Robert Wise, it arrived quietly in 1969, overshadowed by the moon landing and the spectacle of 2001, A Space Odyssey. But unlike Kubrick's cosmic poetry, Wise's vision was sterile, clinical, and terrifyingly plausible. The story begins with a satellite crashing into a small New Mexico town. Every resident is dead, their blood turned to powder. A secret government team of scientists races to contain the threat, discovering that the satellite carried an extraterrestrial microbe capable of mutating faster than they can study it. The tension builds not through explosions or monsters, but through lab procedures, blinking monitors, and the crushing weight of human error. Wise filmed it with documentary precision. The sets were based on actual government designs for biocontainment facilities. Real scientists were hired as consultants. The screenplay, adapted from Michael Crichton's novel, refused melodrama, and that unnerved audiences. Test screenings left viewers disturbed by how plausible it felt. Rumors spread that the Pentagon had pressured Universal to tone down the film's accuracy, fearing it would reveal too much about real germ warfare programs. Though the rumor was never proven, Universal did re-edit several sequences. Critics were divided. Some called it boring, others called it genius. But the years have been kind. Today, the Andromeda Strain is regarded as one of the most chillingly realistic depictions of scientific hubris ever made. It reminds us that sometimes the deadliest alien isn't a creature with claws. It's something invisible, patient, and waiting to evolve. The Time Travelers, 1964. Buried beneath the tidal wave of mid-60s space adventures, The Time Travelers was dismissed as a cheap matinee curiosity. Yet its ideas were decades ahead of their time, blending paradoxes, robotics, and dystopia into a cautionary tale about tampering with time itself. The story opens with three American scientists experimenting with a viewing portal that lets them glimpse the future. But during one test, the machine malfunctions, sucking them through into a far-off era where Earth has been ravaged by nuclear war. Beneath the planet's scorched surface, a colony of surviving humans and their robotic servants struggle to rebuild civilization before the sun burns out. Made on a shoestring budget, the film's ambition was extraordinary. Director Ib Melchior, known for creature flicks, turned in a surprisingly philosophical work that explored humanity's obsession with progress. The future depicted wasn't shiny or utopian. It was sterile, lifeless, and ruled by logic. American International Pictures didn't know how to sell it. They wanted a monster movie, not a meditation on technology's failure. Censors nearly cut its haunting ending, a looping time paradox that traps the heroes in an endless replay of events. Early audiences left theaters bewildered, unsure what they'd just seen. But among science fiction writers, the film became a secret inspiration. Its ending directly influenced later works like Planet of the Apes and 12 Monkeys. Today, The Time Travelers stands as an unsung masterpiece, a small film that asks the biggest question of all: if we could see the future, would we still dare to go there? Planet of the Vampires, 1965. Before Alien haunted theaters in the late 70s, Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires quietly set the blueprint. Released in 1965, it was dismissed as Italian pulp, a low-budget space thriller with melodramatic acting and cheap effects. Yet beneath its campy exterior was a vision of cosmic dread that would echo through science fiction for decades. The film follows two spaceships responding to a distress call from an uncharted planet. When one ship lands, the crew discovers the surface is shrouded in mist and silence until the dead begin to rise. But these aren't vampires in the traditional sense. They're parasitic entities feeding on human consciousness, resurrecting corpses to manipulate the living. Bava shot the entire movie on a soundstage with minimal resources, relying on eerie lighting, colored smoke, and claustrophobic camera work to create an atmosphere of dread. The result was hypnotic. Critics in Europe praised its surreal visuals, but American distributors chopped it down, retitled it for drive-in audiences, and sold it as schlock horror. Censors also intervened, objecting to the film's underlying theme, that humanity itself might be a vessel for alien possession. The Vatican reportedly discouraged screenings in Italy, fearing its portrayal of spiritual corruption. Bava's film was buried under poor marketing and cultural backlash. But years later, Ridley Scott cited Planet of the Vampires as a major influence on Alien. The derelict ship, the fossilized giant alien pilot, the creeping sense of unseen infection, all trace back to Bava's nightmarish imagery. Today, Planet of the Vampires is recognized as a lost masterpiece of atmosphere, a haunting reminder that true horror doesn't scream, it whispers. And sometimes, the real vampires aren't monsters at all, but the fears that live inside our minds. Alphaville, 1965. Jean-Luc Godard's. Alphaville isn't just a science fiction film, it's poetry disguised as dystopia. Released in 1965, it defied every cinematic rule of its time. Filmed without special effects, without sets, and without a single futuristic gadget, it imagined a world ruled by logic, where emotion was outlawed and poetry was rebellion. The story follows secret agent Lemmy Caution as he infiltrates Alphaville, a technocratic city controlled by a computer named Alpha 60. In this cold metropolis, words like love and conscience have been erased from the dictionary. Caution's mission becomes a philosophical battle for humanity's soul. Critics were bewildered. French audiences expecting another romantic new wave drama were confronted with a film shot like a fever dream. Neon lights replaced spaceships, and cryptic narration replaced dialogue. American critics dismissed it as pretentious. The French government nearly banned it from export, calling it anti-modernist propaganda. Behind the scenes, Goddard clashed with censors who objected to the film's subtext, that technology and authoritarianism were slowly merging into one entity. The mechanical voice of Alpha 60, created by distorting a tracheotomy patient's voice, reportedly terrified test audiences. The film's legacy grew quietly. Decades later, filmmakers like Terry Gilliam and Ridley Scott would borrow its vision of bureaucratic dystopia. Its influence can even be seen in Blade Runner's melancholy neon cities and the cold precision of The Matrix. Alphaville remains one of cinema's most haunting prophecies, a world where data replaces feeling and logic kills love. It dared to ask a question still relevant today. If machines can measure everything, what's left of the human heart? The 10th Victim, 1965. Long before reality television and battle royale thrillers dominated pop culture, The 10th Victim imagined a future where murder became entertainment. Released in 1965, this Italian satire blended science fiction, fashion, and absurdity into a film that was both shocking and eerily prophetic. The premise is chillingly simple. In a future society, war has been replaced by an international game called The Big Hunt, where participants take turns being hunter or victim. Survive 10 rounds, and you win fame, fortune, and freedom. Marcello Mastroianni plays a weary veteran of the game who becomes both target and lover of Ursula Andress's glamorous assassin. Audiences were divided. Some found it stylish and seductive, others condemned it as grotesque. The film's dark humor and erotic overtones drew the ire of censors across Europe. The United States even delayed its release, demanding cuts to scenes deemed psychologically perverse. Behind the camera, director Elio Petri faced immense studio pressure to tone down his critique of consumerism. The film portrayed a world where death was broadcast, sponsored, and consumed, a vision that felt uncomfortably close to the growing television age. Though dismissed as pulp in its day, The 10th Victim became a cult favorite among futurists and sociologists. It directly inspired The Running Man, The Hunger Games, and Black Mirror. Petri's vision has aged like prophecy. In a world obsessed with spectacle, the film's central question still echoes. When violence becomes entertainment, who's really watching whom? Fantastic Voyage, 1966. When Fantastic Voyage premiered in 1966, it was heralded as a technical marvel and quickly faded into mainstream familiarity. Yet few remember that it was also one of the most conceptually daring films of the decade, a literal deep dive into the mystery of life itself. The story follows a team of scientists miniaturized to microscopic size and injected into a human body to save a dying diplomat. Inside this living world, they navigate the bloodstream like astronauts in space, dodging antibodies and electric impulses as if they were meteors. Every frame feels monumental, veins like tunnels, the heart like a volcano, the brain like a cathedral. What audiences didn't know was how controversial the film truly was. The US government reportedly pressured 20th Century Fox to remove references to Cold War espionage in the script. The original version had hinted that the patient's brain injury was caused by a failed CIA mission. Those scenes vanished from the final cut. Even more controversial was the film's subtle critique of technological hubris, the idea that human innovation could violate nature's sacred boundaries. Production was a nightmare. Cameras overheated, sets flooded, and special effects teams nearly mutinied under the stress of creating microscopic realism without computer assistance. Actress Raquel Welch suffered repeated injuries during the chaotic artery attack sequence when rubber membranes and fluids malfunctioned on set. Still, the film triumphed, earning Oscars for art direction and special effects. And while it inspired countless imitators, none matched its audacity. Today, Fantastic Voyage feels like a relic from an age when science was equal parts wonder and terror. Its legacy endures not because of its spectacle, but because it dared to ask whether man's greatest frontier might not be outer space, but the space within. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. When 2001, A Space Odyssey premiered in 1968, audiences were confused. Some walked out, others wept. Critics called it incomprehensible. Yet, in the years since, Stanley Kubrick's magnum opus has come to define not just the science fiction genre, but the entire philosophy of mankind's place in the universe. The film opens with primitive apes discovering a black monolith that sparks intelligence. It ends with a lone astronaut transcending space and time itself. Between those bookends lies a meditation on evolution, technology, and consciousness, told with almost no dialogue, only images, music, and silence. MGM executives panicked during early screenings. Kubrick refused to explain the plot, claiming it was meant to be felt, not understood. The studio considered cutting half an hour from its running time. The U.S. Air Force even expressed concern about how accurately the film depicted classified aerospace designs. Behind the scenes, Kubrick's obsession bordered on madness. He spent years consulting scientists, engineers, and even theologians. When the film was finally released, it polarized critics, but hypnotized a new generation of viewers. College students who saw in its cosmic imagery a vision of transcendence. Within a year, it was reappraised as a masterpiece. Over half a century later, 2001 remains untouchable. Its influence echoes through every sci-fi film made since, from Star Wars to Interstellar. But more than spectacle, it left a spiritual question hanging in the void. If mankind's destiny is written in the stars, who or what is holding the pen? The 1960s gave us more than flying saucers and flashing lights. It gave us fear, imagination, and reflection, stories that stared straight into humanity's uncertain future. These forgotten visions remind us that science fiction isn't about aliens or machines. It's about us. So which one still haunts you? Like, subscribe, and tell us below.